Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And we are recording this episode fresh off of playing a good amount of the new Super Smash Bros. Game. As of this recording, it has come out today. I know when this episode releases, it will have been out for about a week.
Yep.
But been having a lot of fun with it, and it has gotten us thinking a little bit about the idea of user experience and recapturing nostalgia or sort of mining nostalgia in its own way.
Yeah. So just to follow up what Geoff said, we are recording on December 7th. It is Smash Brothers Day. You cannot see it, but there are pictures on the internet of me currently wearing Cappy. I've been waiting for this game for a while. I'm a diehard fan. But yeah, it is interesting to look at this Smash Brothers above and beyond any others, because for the first two games, it was all Nintendo. And then for the third game, there were some other characters from other franchises. And now, with this current generation of Smash Brothers, you've got Simon Belmont, who's no longer really technically owned by Nintendo, and definitely not Richter Belmont, who's American.
Oh, none of them were ever owned by Nintendo, but
right.
They got nothing.
They were big Nintendo characters.
True.
And they're relicensed. But we've also just, on the heels of the Game Awards, which just happened the night before, they announced that the first DLC character for Smash Brothers is going to be Joker from Persona 5, which has nothing to do with Nintendo. The Shin Megami series has been on Nintendo platforms before, but Persona has never. It's a Sony property, and the new game is a Sony exclusive.
Yeah,
but this character is coming to the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, Atlas certainly hasn't done a ton of Nintendo releases. They've done some, and yeah, there's no exclusivity on that. So that's also started its own rumor mill.
Right, and also, like, talking to nostalgia, King K. Rool is a brand new character in the new version, and he hasn't appeared in a Donkey Kong game in probably a decade or so. All the new Donkey Kong games have had new villains, and he's not been in it.
And also with the Belmonts actually being in the Smash Brothers game, there's the fact that there really hasn't been a good, honest-to-goodness Castlevania release in a long time. The last releases that have really happened besides pachinko machines have been the Lords of Shadow series, which was an alternate timeline on its own.
And the Belmonts were a little different in that timeline. I mean, in these versions, Simon and Richter are from Super Nintendo and PlayStation era.
Well, Simon was on NES and SNES.
Well, that's
but yeah,
true, yeah,
it's old.
Yeah, and so to bring them back is a huge deal. Also, like the Duck Hunt dog, obviously there hasn't been a Duck Hunt game since Nintendo. These are all characters that are capturing on nostalgia of how fondly we remember them from when they came out. Mm-hmm. And Geoff brought up a good point that there are a lot of other games that are looking to do that. I mean, considering World of Warcraft as of now, this coming summer in 2019, they are releasing WoW Classic, which is going to re-release older versions of the game, starting with the vanilla original version of WoW. And then I believe about 6 months later, they're going to release the original version of Burning Crusade. And they have no plans to go beyond that for now, but they're releasing those two versions of the original World of Warcraft again.
Yeah, and they're not the first MMO to do anything like this. Back in my heyday of playing a lot of EverQuest, there were and still are progression servers.
Yep.
Ones that start off with only original release content, and as people on the server complete content, it unlocks more and more of it.
Yeah. And, it's really interesting to watch an MMO do that, especially considering World of Warcraft, where at this point, every new expansion erases the old one because all of the content is so focused on those 10 levels of that expansion, or 5 on occasion.
Or whatever area it is, or whatever the line
is. And so when
is.
you move on beyond that, everything's attached to that. So they either have to build out from it and tie everything still into it, or start over. And they usually start over.
Right. And WoW being the statistically, realistically, objectively largest, most successful MMO ever released.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing of the more people, the more clamor you have. And so where just about any game you have people calling for the old days, or, it was so much better when it first came out for one reason or another. But when you have 12 million subscribers, you have a much larger population saying everything was better back in the old days. And now Blizzard is giving you, all right, you want the old days? Here's them old days.
Well, yeah, and they had been doing that recently with some other stuff. I mean, we had a whole episode on remasters and re-releases, but this kind of goes beyond it. But it's only grown since the last time we talked about it. They remastered and re-released the original StarCraft. They're doing it to Warcraft 3.
Yes, they are.
And then, Crash Bandicoot had a remastered trilogy that was hugely successful, and now so has Spyro the Dragon. And as of the Game Awards the other night, they announced they're re-releasing Crash Team Racing, and Toys for Bob is giving it the same remaster treatment. And so the remaster is kind of taking the past and bringing it forward. What we want to talk about today is kind of going back to the past. The idea of one of my examples of this with the console generation was the new Super Mario Brothers series. Started on the DS, and it was a side-scrolling 2D Mario game with 3D polygons and incorporating the moves of Mario from the 3D game. So like the triple jump, the wall jump, all of that. But at its core, it was side-scrolling, left to right, get a flag, jump through a hoop, you finish the stage, move on to the next one. The whole game. And the story is even very retro because in the first game it was Bowser Jr. captures Princess, chase Bowser Jr., get Princess back. That's it.
Mario in general has always had a simple through line, a simple storyline, and for the side-scrolling games, that's all you need.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different Mario properties out there, and if you're looking for a deep or challenging storyline, you're not playing a side-scrolling Mario game for that.
Sure, but I think the reason that the new Super Mario Brothers series has stagnated, even though they are re-releasing the most recent one, the Wii U version on the Switch, which I'll probably get and play because I never got that one, and I don't play my 3DS much anymore. The interesting thing is they didn't really iterate much from game to game. There was New Super Mario Brothers, New Super Mario Brothers 2, and the New Super Mario Brothers Wii, and New Super Mario Brothers Wii U. And through all of them, they added some powers, took away some powers, but that was it. No new roster of characters. It was just Mario, Luigi, and two Toads. The stages aren't very different. The worlds aren't very different. You get your Ice World, Fire World, whatever. But for the most part, they went backwards, but then didn't iterate forwards with this new take on going backwards.
And there is some difficulty in that. I mean, as I sort of forgot about the new Super Mario Brothers series, I got
You're not alone.
No, exactly. I got the first one for the DS, really enjoyed it.
Yep.
Same. And only recently have I gone back to start playing some of it, and actually, Sarah and I are playing a decent amount of the Wii U version because we got it cheap at GameStop, and we're like, you know what? Yeah, we love side-scrolling Mario. Let's play it, and we're really enjoying it. And there's a very interesting problem that you run into on this. When you think okay, most Mario is iterative, isn't it? But it isn't. When you compare what Mario 3 for the NES was versus the first Mario, what Mario World was versus Mario 3.
Yeah.
And there were big leaps, big changes, and not just new powers, new ways of interacting with the game to its very core.
Yep.
The idea of, honestly, Super Mario World had several steps back from design ideas of Mario 3, but then you have things like secret exits, which was a completely different take on something else. It took one step back to take 3 steps in a whole new direction.
Sure.
And one wonders how large of steps you can take in this avenue, in this arena, when technology marches the way it does.
Yeah.
We don't have as huge of leaps in terms of what we can and cannot do. A lot of things that happened in early Mario games were made because of necessity. The very idea of ratchet scrolling, of not being able to go back or forth, you had to do that in Mario Brothers because they didn't know how to load up the entire level. You couldn't do that.
Yeah, it loaded as you went.
It loaded as you went and just got rid of what went back. We're not going back. So being able to do that at all in Mario 3 or in Mario 2, and I kind of take Mario 2 out of there because it's its own wild thing, but those were the days in NES where, they thought that the sequel had to be so completely different from the first one.
Yeah.
You look at Zelda 2, you look at Castlevania 2, you look at Mario 2.
Yeah, that's true.
And what's great is those games are mined for great ideas now.
Yeah.
But we almost have to place limitations on game design in order to get new and wild ideas or to get that sort of nostalgia train going. Stuff like The Messenger, stuff like Shovel Knight, and the Curse of the Moon, where it's kind of, well, it looks like this and it plays like this. Why? Because we want it to.
Yeah.
And so from there, where do you go as far as iteration happens?
Yeah.
And I think the big one, if we're talking Mario, has been Mario Odyssey.
Yeah.
Which is a very fun thing. And we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. The idea that Mario Odyssey is a great example of every new game feeling like, well, of course, this is where gaming is right now. Or it's new, it's challenging, it's interesting, it's whatever. But you then go back and play Mario Galaxy. You play Mario Sunshine, Mario 64. And you realize how far graphics have come, how far certain design ideas have come. The absolute, well, of course, simplicity of every time you get a moon, you don't go back to a hub world. You can just keep going. You forget all of the quality of life changes that we don't need to go back to or go back on. Yeah. And that's honestly what got me thinking about us discussing this topic. The fact that, you have something like Smash Brothers now, where we now have 74 characters and counting.
Right, because there's Piranha Plant and Joker, who have both been announced. We're not getting Piranha Plant till February, and then Joker, who knows when.
And whatever's going to come by. So has it been in a Smash game before? It's back.
Yeah.
But that also carries with it all of the updates of quality of life.
Yeah.
And some of those with the design of a system on the go in mind. One of the reasons why in Mario Odyssey they have that idea of the moons and why there's so many of them is so that even if you are playing on the go for 5 or 6 minutes, you can get a moon.
You can find something.
You can find something, make progress, close it, and off you go. And that's a design idea that I don't think we need to go back on.
Yeah.
And so I wonder things like WoW Classic. I was looking at it, and they even had to discuss, like, all right, which specific version of WoW Classic? Because, it was about a year and a half, 2 years before Burning Crusade came out.
Yeah.
So do they do 1.0? I think the patch version they're doing is 1.12.
Yeah.
So there's a very interesting idea there where it's, and yeah, we've talked about remasters and re-releases before, and we've talked about mining nostalgia, but there's a very interesting sort of giving people what they want while also kind of hiding the medicine in the spoonful of sugar.
Yeah, I mean, talking about not just WoW Classic, but you mentioned Smash Brothers, and we've been talking about it quite a bit. The new game removed some stuff that was quality of life stuff that the fans didn't like the random tripping, which they were trying to Nintendo was trying to deter the competitive scene for whatever reason. But now that esports has taken off as much as it has, they came back around on it. But with that, they removed the tripping, but changed how some of the shield mechanics work. But the idea was Melee was the definitive version because the Wii version and the Wii U version had all of these quality of life changes that none of the players liked. Changing certain characters, changing certain gameplay modes. And so Ultimate they're trying to bring Ultimate back around and partner with other companies so they can make this the definitive fighting game. And so they can help kind of control part of the esports section, which is not a terrible idea, all things considered.
And yeah, and people are going to have the experience that they're going to have,
right?
Which is why Melee is the tournament standard of Smash Brothers for now.
Right.
We'll see where Ultimate goes. And it's that fact of, Nintendo can do whatever they want with that. HAL Laboratories can change up whatever they want, but it's like, all right, you've released that. We're still going to play this. And whereas something like an MMO where you have a dynamic world where you can't necessarily be like, I refuse to download that patch.
Right, yeah. Like you don't get a choice.
You don't get a choice. It's very interesting, the games that, you can release new versions or whatever and see which ones people keep coming back to.
Yeah.
And you see that mostly with fighting games.
Yeah.
Because, certainly people spend hours, days, weeks, months of their life learning characters, learning a system.
Yeah.
And even releasing something with all the same characters, all the same moves, but in a new environment radically can alter that experience.
Yeah.
And all of those frame perfect things you have learned and ways to counter and punish and do are suddenly gone.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when, certainly, and again, Smash was a big reason we're talking about this, because it is a competitive fighting game that is trying to give its own definitive experience.
Which also then you have to wonder, like, so they've already announced that you can pre-purchase 5 character packs, which has a new character, a new stage, and new music.
Mm-hmm.
And if you pre-purchased Smash Brothers, you could get the Ultimate Battle Pass version, which discounts the DLC a little bit, but you get it all together, which I did. That means that they're probably not making more DLC. That's the DLC they've planned. They've scoped it out, even if it's not, none of it's been worked on yet. What do you do after that? After this is the definitive version, I hope the Switch lasts forever, but I know it won't. I know they'll iterate on it. They'll either have a new system or an updated version of it. What do we do then? Do you make another Ultimate Smash Brothers? You know, it's like when Mortal Kombat released Ultimate Mortal Kombat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, essentially it was Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. It was the third version of the game with extra characters from the first 2 games.
As of that moment, it was the ultimate version.
And they've gone on, now they're coming out with Mortal Kombat 11 next year. So,
which is effectively Mortal Kombat 3 again.
Yes.
Not actually a reiteration of Mortal Kombat 3 as we played it way back when, but Mortal Kombat 9 was its own reboot of the continuity of style of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like Mortal Kombat 9 was a new 1.
Yeah, and then 10 was a new 2, and so on.
Yeah, within its own sort of thing. Sort of that Lords of Shadow treatment all over again, except it succeeded.
Yeah, well, yes. But it's also interesting with Nintendo specifically because they're doing they've always done a lot of release the old with the new. You know, the Virtual Console and the eShop has always been a big thing. And while the eShop has been really huge because there are no old games on it, it's all previous indie releases that are now being re-released on this system. They did release, if you pay for the online, a Nintendo app, essentially, that allows you to play 30 and growing Nintendo games. But what's interesting is every month so far, when they've released new games, they've also released a previous game as a special version. So with the first initial release, there was a special version of Zelda where you start with all of the items, the weapons, a lot of your hearts, but none of the bosses or any of the game beaten. So you can have a leg up to start that game, and so those who are not skilled at collecting or getting in Zelda can play it.
You can just explore the map, really.
Yeah, and also they did that now, the newest release, well, as of November, because the December games haven't come out yet, but the November release, they re-released Gradius, and it was the same way. You start the new game with a ton of lives, all of the maximum weapons, and it allows you to play through these stages and see more of the game than starting bare bones with nothing. And I think that's really interesting because it doesn't take a lot. They're not changing the game. They're not changing the code, adding stuff to the game. All they're doing is starting the game with stuff that you get later.
And I mean, Gradius is the origin of the Konami code, so it's already built into kind of the game's DNA that there are ways to give yourself a leg up.
Right. And so I think it's really interesting that they decided to do that because it's iterating on the past in a way that no other designer that I can think of done with, and it's probably really easy to do on the Nintendo since the code is so bare bones. But you're just giving people in advance things they can get on their own.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting doing that versus like, you know, re-releasing Super Mario Brothers 3 remastered with new graphics and new abilities and all that stuff.
Well, and I think the fun with this is the fact that, I mean, we've mentioned a few times on this episode and in other ones that idea of nostalgia. Not just the those were the days, or I loved this game, but the fact that something like The Messenger is a modern indie game that is released in the vein of an 8-bit and a 16-bit game with the sort of updates and things that plays like how we remember those games, not actually how those games were.
Right.
And something like having these, whatever you want to call it, and I'm sure Nintendo has a specific name for this kind of like boost mode, whatever it is, test buff kind of thing, is Gradius is a hard game.
Yeah.
It is. And there are games that I remember when I was a kid that I would play and play and play, and I got so good at them.
Yeah.
And I now, in rebuilding my collection, will get them. And I'll play them, and I go, were they always this hard? They were. I just, skills have atrophied, or I don't have the time to put into it, or whatever.
Or we used a lot of Game Genie.
Or whatever it was. And so there's that fact of, well, I want to see as much of the game as I used to, or play as well as I did. And this is another one of those instances of being able to play as well as you remembered playing, even if that's not how you're playing now.
Yeah.
So it still serves that same idea of nostalgia in terms of giving it to you how you remember it, not necessarily how it actually was.
Yeah, like I am hoping that they do this iteration thing with Metroid, which just came out in November, because I tried playing the new Metroid and I got like 20 minutes in before I got annihilated and then had to start all the way back at the beginning. And I'd just forgotten how difficult that game was.
Well, certainly the original Metroid that's an interesting release because honestly, I'm going to say it. It's not a great game.
No, it's not.
And
the original Metroid and the original Castlevania are not great games.
The original Castlevania, I'll argue with you.
Well, I think also those older games, the thing is that they push you to the limit without necessarily always rewarding you. Castlevania has its own rewards and its progression, but at the end of the day, it's harder than it needs to be.
It's also a game that is linear.
Yes.
There's no branching paths. There's only a few levels. And so there is a set amount of challenges to get yourself through.
That's true.
So it's sort of like it is a very curated, if complex in terms of difficulty, experience.
Right.
I mean, and again, I can get decently far in Castlevania. That's one of the games that I not too long ago re-added to my collection. And I mostly had only ever played it through emulation. So it's really fun to play it with a controller again. And, you know, I definitely could not get as far as I had back in high school when I was playing it on my laptop. But I get farther every time.
Sure.
But Metroid was a game that it's not a linear experience. You needed a map. Yeah. You need more identifying marks as to where you are. But the limitations of the system, you couldn't have a map. And like, oh man, you could either have vertical scrolling or horizontal scrolling. That's why the rooms are set up that way.
Right, because it couldn't do both.
And so there was a lot of reuse of texture so they could give you a vast, for its time, world.
Yeah.
But Super Metroid is an easy recommendation. It has a map system. It has differentiation. It has all of that stuff that we don't need to go back to in Metroid.
Right. Super Metroid is definitely the definitive version of that game. And the reason the Game Boy Advance, DS, and 3DS games that were all side-scrollers succeeded because they aped that style and improved it.
They aped that style, and they were also built for a different kind of experience. Most successful handheld games are built to be played in small bursts.
Right.
Whether they have a save function or they have something so that no matter what, when you turn it on, you can make a little progress. Only being able to write down your password after you died is a very NES era thing.
That is true.
And it's still carried over into future generations, but like really it is a thing of when it happened in SNES, that was just grandfathered ideas that we can do better than that now.
Yeah.
And we can do better than that nowadays too in 2018.
Well, sure. I mean, actually, something worth bringing up is I played Volume 1 of the Mega Man X collection that's on the Switch. And something they iterated that was a no-brainer that I never even thought of is they converted the password screen into a save screen.
Right.
So what it does is it save states the password. And so when you go back to your game, when you load it, all it's done is remembered the password and auto inputs it for you. But it functions as a save feature.
That's really cool.
And I mean, you don't have to auto press anything. All you do is you click save. The password pops up and it saves. And then when you load the next game, you go to load, you hit load game, the password pops up, the game starts.
Yeah.
And it's really brilliant, and it makes it infinitely more playable, Mega Man X1, 2, and 3, because those all didn't have save files.
Right. Whereas I don't have the Legacy collection because I actually still have the Mega Man X collection for the PS2.
Fair.
And there's that sort of like, why do I need to buy it for another system? I probably will eventually.
Right.
But those had just rather than the passwords, it was a save screen. You had to save it on your PS2 memory card. And the amount of time it took to load up that save screen just really, it reminds you how long loading times can be.
Right.
Like even if it's a second or 2 seconds at a time, it all adds up. Whereas something like, just save state the password and you're kind of using the same working order and just streamlining it a little and creating a more convenient idea. You don't have to, You don't have to have your notebook of passwords anymore.
Right.
And while I have some nostalgia for that, I don't need to go back to it.
No. And so Mega Man X4 is the only one on Volume 1 that is based on a PS1 game, so it has a built-in save feature.
Right.
Which works just as fast, but it was interesting to see them do that. Also, something that was nice about Mega Man X, and I wonder if they have in the Mega Man collection, which I haven't bought yet, but I will eventually because I love Mega Man, they have Rookie Hunter mode.
Oh, yeah.
All it does is make the game simpler in different ways in each game, but you don't lose. It's not an easy mode, so you don't get certain endings or get certain stuff. All it does is make the enemies do less damage, and in certain games, spikes don't kill you instantly. And that doesn't affect the outcome. We talked in previous episodes about how back in the day, easy mode penalized you often and didn't give you the full version of the game.
Right.
This is that, but not doing that. It's taking classic games, but giving it a modern easy mode.
Well, they did something like that when they released the Mega Man Zero collection for the DS.
Okay.
You could play each of the 4 Mega Man Zero titles separately, but there was also, I'm blanking on exactly what it was called, but it was basically an ultimate mode.
Yeah.
That linked it all together, and you could choose to have it be a little more forgiving.
Yeah.
It is still a challenging Metroidvania-ish Mega Man. Oh my god, I love this. I love that series so much. But it was less harsh and unforgiving if you died or failed a mission.
Yeah.
There was all sorts of things that if you screwed something up in a mission in the GBA titles, well, that's gone forever. Well, it's streamlined and simplified. And some people didn't like that. But it means more people get to play the game and more people get to see more of the game. And whether you want to call that a definitive experience or not.
And so that's talking about accessibility. I bring this back around to WoW Classic, which also inspired this conversation. The original WoW was pretty unforgiving. The raids were really hard. The skill trees you had to study and learn.
Because you couldn't go back. There was no retraining.
Right, which I'm sure they'll have in this version.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that they're going back in the past to a more complicated and more difficult version of the game, a lot of the iterations of World of Warcraft and the expansions have oversimplified the game because as the audience got bigger, they wanted it more accessible, which makes total sense.
And you can add more and more features, and that allows new ways in this and that, but those have effects on older ideas and older philosophies. So it just by its very design will simplify.
And that's why they had to remove the trees or change them so they had less skills because it was just otherwise the game didn't work. It was broken. And so what I'm curious about with WoW Classic is obviously the older talent trees will be there. The more advanced skills and play flows will be in the game. But will they add some of the quality of life stuff behind the scenes to simplify some of it? Or allow people to choose to simplify it. And that's what I'm curious about. Because I imagine they want it to be as true to the classic experience as possible.
Right.
Because they're charging a separate subscription fee for it. Mm-hmm. I believe if you're paying for regular WoW, you get WoW Classic at a discount or for free.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you can just subscribe to WoW Classic if you don't want to play the new game.
And given that I haven't had an active WoW subscription in 10 years, it's nice that they offer that. I don't know if they'll offer options to turn on and off in that experience because they're
trying to mimic something that had already existed.
Yeah, and I don't know how much customizable options you can have on that and changing the overall experience or balance.
Right. I mean, also, it's had a very heavy mod community since day one, and so I'm sure there will be mods that allow you to do some things.
There are already mods, I'm sure, somehow.
But what's interesting about this conversation about nostalgia and iterating backwards is that I wonder if it's to the detriment of the industry sometimes. This excludes the indie developers, those who are taking old game modes or old types of games and iterating on them to make a new classic feeling experience. Your Celeste, The Messenger, Dead Cells, that stuff is excluded because that's still forward progression.
Yeah, they are still making forward strides in game design and design philosophy and in gameplay ideas.
Yeah.
While wrapping it up in a simpler art style or an arena where we accept a more simplified gameplay. Not everything has to be balls to the wall, bleeding edge AAA to be progressive.
Right. But with WoW Classic, with this new Super Mario Brothers, with some of these other things we've mentioned, they've gone backwards with no intent of iterating. I mean, I imagine Nintendo with new Super Mario Brothers wanted to, but they didn't. And with WoW Classic, they don't. They're purposely going backwards to go backwards and give you that experience.
They're doing it as a revenue stream, not as any great revolution.
Right. But also, even with the progression servers on EverQuest, you have to wonder, does that hurt the industry and set an expectation for giving in to the fan too much? Which, like, I know, essentially these games are made for the players, obviously. But I just wonder, like, there's a certain level of belly aching that gets stuff done and it doesn't always feel great. Like, back to the Mass Effect 3 days, everyone hated the ending to that game.
Yep.
They iterated on it and they still hated the ending to that game. And, like, there's now a canonical, not original version of the ending that exists that I haven't even seen yet that I'll eventually get to on Reignite. But the fans still weren't pleased. So what was the point? You know? And fans came up with theories that personally I liked better, that they have openly declined, even though they fit really well. And that also frustrates me. Like, one of my favorite things about Undertale, which I've only recently played, and I only played once, I haven't done a pacifist or genocide run yet, is that Toby Fox gave you that game. Toby Fox, you can theorize, you can hunt for clues, and there are plenty of people who have. You know, I enjoy MatPat's video on the theory of it and, you know, all of the things about that game. But essentially, the narrative is very loose. And you can discover as much or as little of it as you want. And that's absolutely not giving in to the fans. With Deltarune having just come out, and that one also doing something similar, but clearly in a separate world, but there are connections, and there are questions, and blah, blah, blah.
And it's vague on purpose to just let everybody either come to their own conclusions and be proven wrong, right, or whatever they want.
But imagine if Toby Fox... Like, thankfully, it's a hit, and the fans haven't done this. But imagine if the fans went to Toby Fox and said, I don't understand this. It's not clear. You need to fix this so it's more streamlined. And they were loud enough, and he wasn't an indie developer. He might cave to that, and it would ruin that game's experience. Because that whole game is based on you having vagaries. The whole combat system depends on the vagueness.
It is a game that, by its very design, reminds you of older games so that you fall back on a simpler binary way of thinking.
Even though it doesn't apply to that binary.
It doesn't. It is far more nuanced.
And so that's where I worry, is that things like that might happen. Now, thankfully, with a lot of the indie titles, they can mostly ignore that. If the sales numbers are good, if the people are buying or hyped about the game, the loud people who want something that's should not be delivered can be ignored.
Well, also the fact that a lot of indie developers don't have as far-reaching of a back catalog as Blizzard, as Nintendo, as Sega, as Square, as Konami even has. Like, I mean, they've got Requiem that just came out, Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Dracula X Rondo of Blood, all in one package for your PS4, and it leaves you wondering: are they going to release more Castlevania, or are they just giving us this so that we can experience this and go, hey, wasn't this great?
Right. Yeah. You know, I wonder about that too. I mean, part of it probably goes with their partnership with Nintendo and the fact that Simon and Richter are in the new game. They wanted to release something that they were in.
Well, I think Sony was the ones that approached Konami on it because it's a Sony exclusive.
Right. And the Symphony of the Night, at least initially, was also a PlayStation exclusive. Mm-hmm. It's since not been. Although the only thing that irritates me about that, and I think I've said this on the show, is that I want everything on my Switch.
Yep.
And Konami is not Sony exclusive anymore. Please give me that game on the computer or on my Switch, please. I love Symphony of the Night.
Right. Well, you can play it in so many ways. I can already play it like 3 different ways. All of it's Sony.
But it is interesting that, you know, remastering isn't the only thing that exists as far as iterating anymore. It seemed like it was. When we talked about it earlier on in the show, it was the pervasive thing. Everything was getting remastered from PS3 to PS4, Xbox 360 to Xbox One.
The HD, yeah.
Or even games that hadn't been out that long. Like Skyrim got a re-release on PC, on everything, with updated graphics and the DLC and blah, blah, blah. Like, the only reason I've thought about buying the Switch version is because it's portable and it includes all the DLC in the base game.
And it's got Legend of Zelda stuff in it.
It does.
That's not a selling point for me, but it's there.
Right. Well, like, I'm surprised you haven't bought Diablo 3 yet on the Switch. And I know you have it on the 360.
And that is the reason why... No, I'm gonna get it on the Switch.
I know.
Well, part of it was I needed to wait until I had my own Switch. There are now 2 Nintendo Switches in my household.
Yeah.
Because Sarah and I thought we'd be able to share,
Which I predicted was not going to last.
You were right.
Yes.
And Sarah finally went, I'm not good at sharing.
Go buy your own.
Go buy your own. And I'm very fortunate that we could afford to do that.
Yeah, of course, sure.
And now that I have my own, this will mean, okay, I'll get Diablo 3. I'll get Hyrule Warriors Ultimate.
Yeah.
Another definitive edition.
I have that. Yeah, so, and we're also in a weird, interesting time where, but I think this is exclusive to Nintendo, they're iterating backwards, forwards. And what I mean by that is, like, all of the Wii U stuff is getting re-released on the Switch with added features.
Because it was technically the biggest failure Nintendo's had since the Virtual Boy.
And nobody played those games. And I'm, like, anyone who's had a Wii U is kind of sore about it, but I, as someone who never owned one, am reaping the benefits of it.
Right. There is that enjoyment of, like, no, let's just give you this way to enjoy this game. And then there is that sort of thing, because the people that this is being sold to are not the Wii U owners.
It's the Switch owners.
Yeah, they're not being sold to me.
Yeah.
It's not, hey, remember Tropical Freeze? Didn't you like it? Now with Funky Kong and portability. It is so that a new audience can find it. Whereas something like WoW Classic is for people who played vanilla WoW.
Yeah.
You know, Smash Brothers Ultimate is for everybody, but it is also very, very much for, hey, you remember Smash. And I think that is one of the key differences.
Yeah.
It's not a accessibility, it is a nostalgia revenue mine.
Yeah. And I think,
and it's a fine line.
And, like, other games have done this too. Like, we talked in depth about the Mega Man series in a previous episode with Case, and, like, that one, it made huge advancements with 7 and 8, and 8 was a phenomenal game.
I liked it.
And then 9 and 10 went backwards. Yep. They went to the original sprite art. They took away the slide, I think, in one of them.
They took away the slide and the charge.
Charge shot. And, like, this idea to make it more difficult. And while I know a lot of people who like those games, I hated them because I liked the advances. And it's why I loved 11 so much, because they went, oh, those other games, forget that. This is the real way to reiterate on Mega Man.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And I think it was brilliantly done. But, again, it's this idea of a lot of these companies now are going backwards before going forwards because there's been enough time, and nostalgia is really powerful. Like, I guarantee if there are any new Castlevanias, they will be 2D and not 3D, I promise you. Because of how badly the 3D ones flopped. And I played them recently. The Lords of Shadow 1 was pretty compelling and a lot of fun on easy. Every other difficulty, it was a nightmare. And then the second game was just a hot mess.
Yeah.
And then also on Steam, they re-released, there was a prequel in between on
Mirrors
the 3DS.
Of Fate.
Which they also released on Steam, which, boy howdy, playing a game that was designed for the DS on the PC is real interesting.
Anybody who's played through the Ultimate Collections of Kingdom Hearts and had to play through Regarding Chain of Memories
knows exactly how that feels.
Yes.
But it's interesting that they will release those things on in other places to just try and A, feed into the nostalgia a bit, and B, get people hyped for what's coming. Like, we have an official release date for Kingdom Hearts 3. I do not have enough time to replay all of the old games. And I've considered it. But it's one of those things where I do really still want to get those definitive collections on PS4 because I haven't played them since PS2. I never got the other definitive versions because there have been many.
Yes, there have.
And I know I'll eventually want to play them all in succession. And I'm obviously getting 3 on day one release because,
Yep,
it's Kingdom Hearts 3.
It is.
But it's interesting to me that, a game like Kingdom Hearts, which has taken so long to release the third game in a series that's been around for over a decade.
And they've been releasing other Kingdom Hearts games.
Just not numbered pieces of the series.
And there is something that I've noticed this in movies as well, but definitely with games too. There is the idea that, if something is made by the original creators, even 20 years later, oh my gosh, we're getting back to the roots, this is going to be great. But the fact of the matter is, there are so many factors in place in the design of any piece of art.
Yeah.
And something like a game, there's financial factors, there's teams, there's the company, there's technology, there's so much. And no matter what, if there's enough distance, and I can't say for certain what that distance of time is, if with enough distance, you can no longer make a sequel. Yeah. Every game you make is going to be a fan game.
Yeah.
When I first hit upon this theory, and I'm sure others have had it and can put it way more eloquently, but it occurred to me in film, watching Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Right.
Because enough time had passed in that trilogy that it didn't matter how many of the original people you got, no matter what, they were making a very well-funded fan film.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so Mega Man 9 is just a fan game that was given official. It's as much of a fan game as Mega Man X Street Fighter was, as much of a fan game as Sonic Mania Plus is.
Yeah.
As any of these, and whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, this is something that we need to accept.
Yeah.
If any of these properties, if any of these things, if we want to see progress in the games that we choose and in what companies do, like, we need to see that.
Yeah, I mean, with Sonic Mania Plus, like, I bought the original Sonic Mania the day it came out. I was super excited for that. New side-scrolling, 8 to 16-bit graphics, 32-bit. I don't remember.
And that's a game that I really started playing it recently. It's the first card I put into my new Switch. I'd gotten it beforehand and then never got my hands on the Switch because Sarah kept playing it because Octopath Traveler.
Right.
And I was playing it. I'm just going, this looks and feels like how we remember Sonic.
Yeah.
It's super clean. It's super crisp. It there's no slowdown.
And I've recently gone back and played Sonic 2 or Sonic CD, which is on the PC. Mm-hmm. It definitely doesn't play like that.
No.
We think it does.
But it does.
Doesn't.
And the thing is, one of the main guys that they brought on, he has made so many Sonic fan games.
Yeah.
And they finally just went, well, we're only going to be making a fan game anyway, so you do a way better job of that. So get on board and let's make something that the fans are going to enjoy.
Yeah. And what's really interesting
it's embracing that.
Right. And what's interesting about that too with Sonic Mania is, like, I bought the Plus DLC because I'd gotten the game when it came out. Mm-hmm. When I got the Plus DLC, I didn't play it right away, but I started playing it again recently to take a break from Pokemon, and I played as Mighty, who nobody knew this, but was one of my favorite Sonic characters. When I played Knuckles Chaotix, he's the only character I picked. It drove my friends nuts because Charmy B was better for this, Vector was better for that, always Mighty. And so the fact that they put this such obscure character that I really liked in the game canonically with new abilities that he never had, I was like, this is the best fan game I've ever played.
What an ultimate edition.
Right. I think at the end of the day, though, and the question I'll pose to the audience is, when does going back to go forward a detriment? And, like, that's my biggest concern with World of Warcraft Classic. As someone who's going to play, I'm going to pay for that because I started playing WoW with my friends before BC, raiding together. Like,
I was part of a text chain with Kieran and another friend of ours where it was just, oh, this is happening. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Do we need to? Oh, no.
And it's one of those things where, thankfully, I am in enough control of my own real life and have enough shit to do that I will never fall down the hole I fell before. But that said, I am excited to go back to it. But I'm also hesitant because as someone I am not an elite gamer. I can be pretty good at certain games. But for the most part, I'm a novice at a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And MMOs are one of those things. Like,
Same.
I can tank really well if the tank controls are really simple. Like, will be your best tank frontliner as long as the control flow is simple enough. And in original WoW, it was not, which is often why I was a DPS warrior and the laughingstock of my guild.
Oh.
But going back to WoW Classic, like, one of my best friends, he started the guild that we played through progression in, and we're excited to kind of try and repeat that. But I'm hesitant also because of how hard I remember the game was to play. And a lot of people are lamenting for that time. Whereas I'm one of the people who didn't mind this simplifying of WoW because I struggled with some of the mechanics.
Right.
And so, but that doesn't mean that WoW Classic is a bad thing. It just means that it might not be right for me. And what I'm curious about, and I pose to the listener, is where do you draw the line at going back and remastering or going back to iterate? Like, what do you think are things that are not worth repeating or going back to?
Yeah, which things should just stay in the past, I suppose. Right. Whether it's, you liked the Insane trilogy, but you don't really care about the new Spyro, or
with the new Crash Team Racing. Like, I loved the original Crash Team Racing and Mario Kart. I love the original Mario Kart. There's no reason to play the Super Nintendo Mario Kart.
There is no reason to play that.
It's a terrible game, but I loved it.
And they've been releasing Mario Karts since that have had all kinds of iterations and evolutions, and whether you like playing 64 or Double Dash or Mario Kart 8 or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe or whichever they are, they've been evolving on that, where this is just simply, hey, remember that one time that we made a kart racing game 20 years ago? Well, it's back in POG form.
Yeah.
And so,
who's
to say?
I wonder, and this is sort of an unofficial sequel to our remaster episode also, but I feel like we're eventually going to hit a wall with remastering, but just the same, like my example of why remastering is good is they remastered the Uncharted trilogy, which I still haven't finished, but I'm most of the way through. I never had a PS3. I now have a PS4.
Right.
I skipped that generation. If they didn't remaster Uncharted, I would have never played it.
Right. Accessibility matters on this, but it's accessibility, it's preservation, and that's why I say that there is a fine line in that idea of, is it accessibility or is it a revenue stream? It's always a revenue stream.
Right.
But
what's the focus? Why?
The what and the why, and are we evolving or is it too late?
Yes. So please share with us, as always, your thoughts on the matter. If I haven't mentioned recently, I will mention now. We have a Discord server. You can find it all over Certain Point of View. We have permalinks that you can join our Discord server. There are chat channels. There are voice channels. Please join us in the discussion. We love chatting with you guys on social media, and this is just a more real-time way where we can respond to you if you have questions, concerns, or want to share a topic. Of course, a shout out to all of the members of the Certain Point of View family, the Certain Point of View podcast, Scruffy Nerve Herders, Another Pass with Case Aiken, and Reignite. All of those shows are available on certainpov.com. Please go there, subscribe to everything, write reviews for everything, and love us.
Yes, please. We need it.
Our egos are suffering.
Yes. We like talking about these things, but we like having this be a bigger conversation.
Yes.
Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.